Okay, so my name is Eric McGee. I'm the Director of Marketing and Corporate Communications for Education Dynamics, and with me co-presenting today is Jana Weary. Jana is our Senior Director of Marketing Services on our Enrollment Management Services team. She oversees a lot of the marketing that we do for a number of our large clients that we've got. So really excited to have Jana. She's got some great thoughts and insights here that we're looking forward to sharing with you. Just a little bit about us. If you're not as familiar with Education Dynamics, we are a company that does enrollment management services and inquiry generation for universities and colleges across the country. We engage with prospective students in schools, everything from consideration to graduation. And if you want to hear more about that or would like some more information, I'm happy to speak with you or provide that information for you after the webinar. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do today. First, we're going to start off with talking about why. Why are we here? Why is this conversation important at all times, but in particular, why is it important today in the environment that we find ourselves in? We'll talk a little bit about getting back to the basics of our conversations and our marketing communication. And then we'll talk about some key points about making sure that the messaging that we have in our marketing and our communication is authentic throughout. And then we'll talk about some summaries and some takeaways and make sure that, that we answer any questions that you might have. We will have a Q&A session at the end, so feel free. You will see that there is a Q&A pod there that you can click on and add your questions to that. We will try and check those throughout, and if there's something that's relevant during the conversation, we'll try to pull it out, but for the most part, we'll leave those for the end. So please feel free at any time to post something into the Q&A session. We'll keep an eye on it, and we'll try to address every single one of those at the end of the conversation.
Okay, welcome everybody. Let's start with why today. Why is it important for us to have conversations like the one we're having today? We've become aware that the average adult prospective student is looking for permission to believe. So this is something that Seth Odell shared. He's from National University and presented at Calum earlier this year. And we recognize that consumer confidence in higher education has fallen in recent years, and institutions must work harder to earn trust. So throughout all of this, more and more universities have begun to compete for non-traditional, post-traditional adult students. So we've got a double constraint happening here. At the same time, investing time, energy, and money to earn a degree can be a scary prospect, especially considering many students don't believe they will be successful. So this is why it's important for us to recognize that our job is to give our students the permission to believe. So how do we help people believe? We start by building trust. And so Brene Brown in her book, Dare to Lead, uses the marble jar concept. So she explains how trust works in this way. Essentially, trust is built slowly over time and in small moments, but it can become significantly diminished in one single moment. So each trust-building moment adds one marble to the jar, while each action that erodes trust spills several marbles all at once. As marketers, how we communicate with our students and prospective students, whether outbound or inbound, is how we build or erode trust. So it's important for us to recognize that that is our opportunity to develop the trust that we so need to build. That involves asking some questions. Is your message believable? Is it relevant? Is it consistent with other messages students are receiving about you and from you? Are you adding marbles to the jar, or are you spilling them out? So we want to start by going back to some basics. Before this, when an ad was jarring or problematic, we might have just passed over it without noticing. But now the reaction is immediate and powerful. We are in a moment of clarity. And I think this is the thing that's really become obvious to us, is that this is an opportunity to pay close attention and find ways to approach our marketing in a more human way. It's something that we've talked about for quite a while now, but this is a real moment of opportunity for us to take that mantle up and go ahead and put action behind it. So these are things that we can do, not just now in the middle of this crisis, but the things that we talk about today are relevant continuing into the future. That means we need to go back to basics first. So as you review your marketing and decide what your next steps are after today, I want to encourage you to ask yourself some of these questions. So why? What is your why? Why do you get up in the morning and do the work you do? Why should anyone be interested in what you offer? Why should they trust you? What do you really offer? Are you supporting students? Do you have programs that prepare students for specific career opportunities? What is there? What's really in the meat of your offerings? And who do you really serve? Who are you best positioned to serve as well? Who do you want to serve? So we talk a lot about different audiences and communities who we want to reach. Are we really serving those communities? This is a basic question, but it's important. And then how do your online offerings fit within the overall university brand? So if your unit is focused on supporting online and providing online programs, like many of our clients are, how do you align? How does your unit align and fit into the overall institutional umbrella? That means brand, that means the operational aspects. You know, how does a student engage with you that in ways that may be different with the main university, and in what ways is that similar? So these are things you need to be clear on so that as you go to reevaluate your messaging, you have a really good baseline. So today we'll talk about some key points for that. So one of the things we talked about was building trust. And what that requires is authentic messaging. People care more about authentic messaging and storytelling now than ever before. And so we'll discuss some ways that you can, some specific ways that you can bring your attention to your messaging and make it more authentic. So a couple things that we highlighted and we've identified in our own work is what we start with, don't be tone deaf, derivative, or opportunistic. So we'll talk about some examples of what that means, but this is where we started. Let's make sure we're not causing any damage, that we're not actively eroding trust in our messaging. Next, we get to the point where we're getting better. We're going to focus on the student. Then we're going to make sure that we're being consistent and honest with our brand story messaging. Next, we will make sure we're doing what we need to internally and in our teams to facilitate idea sharing, not just in our marketing teams, but across functional teams. And then we want to make sure we're gathering tools. We're using this opportunity to gather tools to help us be more agile and responsive in the future.
So as Jonna mentioned, we had 3 don'ts that we really wanted to focus on. The first one is don't be tone deaf, don't be derivative is the second one, and don't be opportunistic. So let's just really quickly look at a few examples of some things that we have really identified during this time right now that came across as issues that we wanted to make sure that we addressed to make sure that our messaging was authentic and true and reached the students in a way that, that helped us build that trust. So in this first image that you see in the upper left-hand corner, this was the original image that we had for an ad that was running and really doing quite well for us. And you can see there's a number of people that are quite close. They're sharing screens, they're touching. 3 months ago, this image was perfectly fine and normal and would be something that that would invite inclusion and really engage with people. But with this particular current crisis, people became very sensitive to the imagery that we were using in the ads. And so it was important for us to make sure that we aligned the images that we were using with this. And then the second part is that we had to align the messaging as well to make sure that it was sensitive to the current situation that we were in and the current situation, more importantly, that our prospective students are in. And the third part that we really looked at was, are there messages that are providing resources that are talking about on-campus facilities that students might be able to access, or other resources that aren't really relevant or true at this time? And so it was important for us to go through and make sure that our messaging matched the reality of the situation today. So as I said, this is an example of a simple update that we made where all we did was we swapped out the image from a group image where there's several people that are close together and touching, to a single student who, not only is it just a single student, but it's someone that clearly is in an at-home environment, is working from home, studying from home, and not out in a public setting like they were in the first image. So we went through and audited all of our images. I'm sure many of you have done that, and also audited the messaging that we were using as well, to make sure that there was something that was not talking about, again, messaging about on-campus career services that are available to students, or different things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another key change we made here that's it's easy to miss is that we had while working in the messaging in the first ad. And given the situation right now with unemployment, we felt that was another tone deaf piece, that there are many people who might not be working right now. And so we just simply removed that. It didn't really require a lot of change here, but we wanted to honor that. And honestly, it didn't really add a lot to the ad. So we're identifying ways actually to make our copy better here and more simple here.
So the second thing that we had that was a don't was don't be opportunistic, or don't, more importantly in this case, don't appear opportunistic. Some of you may have seen this email that actually did go out from a university, unfortunately. As you can see on the date, it went out on Tuesday, March 24th, which was, about 2 weeks after most places were really locked down, and at a time when there was still very much a lot of uncertainty about what the future might look like, and a lot of really scared people out there. This happened to be a pre-planned email that went out about gift planning, that was scheduled according to the school before the coronavirus became an issue that was really top of mind. And for whatever reason, they didn't catch that this email was going out, and it went out to people. It made the news nationally, and I think really kind of upset several people. They ended up having to apologize on several different platforms about the email that went out, and explain how it was pre-scheduled, and not something that was specific to the current pandemic or the current crisis. So one thing that this has really brought home for us, and what we're communicating to schools as well, is make sure that you're maintaining a content calendar, and so that you know what's going out when, and you can be thoughtful about looking at that. It may not be a surefire way to avoid things like this, but if you have a content calendar and it specifically talks about what's in the message, it helps you easily identify any changes that you might have to make, and that's something that we'll talk about a little bit later as well. The third point is don't be derivative. If you put out a COVID statement, did it add anything that was specific to your student or your prospective student's current situation? Was it insightful or unique? Or did it follow the same pattern that a lot of them followed, which was just a message that was broad and general and talked about the current environment that we're all in? If you do a search in your inbox for something like uncertain times, how many emails come up that you received that have the same basic template? And there's been a lot of conversation in both Ad Age with this video that we've got on here. If you haven't seen this, it's a really interesting watch. It's a little bit uncomfortable because it really kind of brings home how common the theme is, and what the template is that so many companies are putting out. So we really want to encourage you to think about having a message that is specific and thoughtful and helpful and useful for your prospective students or your students. There's also an article on Wall Street Journal that talks about this same thing, the template and the pattern that so many advertisers have followed at this time. And it really isn't adding anything of value to your audience.
So once we attacked, really, we quickly responded to those first three items. Let's make sure we're not being tone deaf. Let's make sure that we're not creating an appearance or being opportunistic. And then let's make sure we're not being derivative. Once we tackled that, our next step was to identify, now, how can we do better and how can we be better? How can we take this opportunity to improve our marketing, not just react to the current situation? So one of the principles that we came up with related to that is going back to putting the student at the center of everything. So that's what we'll talk about here. So there's lots of ways we can do this, and that there are several that we came up with specifically. So where we arrived was with this list. So the first step is to listen. The next step for us was to acknowledge and to whatever extent you can address their pain points. Then we have opportunities to curate our communication. Then we have also the ability to, and I'll urge us all to get really creative about how we can highlight benefits instead of listing features, and we'll talk about why that's important. We want to provide relevant information. So to Eric's point just now, how can we make sure that what we're providing in our messaging is relevant and specific to what they need versus, you know, a kind of a derivative, broad message. And then last but not least, we need to encourage our students and acknowledge their achievements. As I mentioned earlier, it's a scary time in general, and really honestly, investing in a degree can be a scary prospect. And it's important for us to remember that and to applaud our students and our prospective students for the progress they're making. So our first step here is to listen. This is, I think, the step that maybe gets forgotten the most often by our marketing teams, and I fall in this trap as well at times. But right now, it's clearer than ever how important it is for us to truly listen to what prospective students and students need. That involves a few things. So there's a few ways that you can do this, and I'm sure there are others. One is to monitor social media engagement. So you can use programs like Agorapulse and Hootsuite to monitor your social media engagement, allowing you to respond quickly you know, maybe you have multiple pages and profiles out there. You can consolidate that all into one place and have a real strategy, cohesive strategy for responding. And the key here is to respond quickly and personally. And something that I've seen is a tendency to delete or hide negative or challenging comments. And it is essential that we find a better way to do that, because that is information. It's information from people in the community about how they're responding to us, and we need to listen. But we also have to address that. So there are ways, frameworks that we can put in place for responding by acknowledging the negative comment, getting clarification or clarifying, and then offering to address the concern directly, taking it offline, for instance, to encourage a conversation with the person who's commented. Another step is to engage. So once you're monitoring and paying attention, now we need to engage people. We can do that via what I just talked about by really engaging people who are commenting, but we can also launch polls to gather information. So that's kind of a fun way to get valuable insights into the mindset of your students. Another important piece is to do research. So specifically, paid search trends is a really great tool for you to use to better understand what it is that people are wanting, what they're looking for, what they need. You can also pay attention to other trends like social media usage trends, things like that, that help us understand what kind of mindset our prospects are in. Another thing is another option for listening, another tool that you can use for good listening is just to ask questions. So it's simple, but it's maybe it could look like, so we're actually in the midst of developing an organic post for one of our clients right now for a program that's related to, that's targeting the emergency management community. So they are hard hit right now. And we want to know how this is impacting them right now. It gives us information, but it also gives our consumers, our students, a chance to be heard and to share what's happening in their lives. And then last but not least, we need to stay informed. So this can be very difficult. There's a lot of information going around, and you know, you have to kind of key in on what are the sources of information that are really quite good. And we actually had an email chain go around recently at EducationDynamics, just sharing what are the sources that people have found helpful. You know, and of course my mind is going blank right now, but there's Inside Higher Ed, there's Higher Ed Chronicle, there's so many options out there. And then we've also got organizations like UPCA in higher ed and marketing like Adobe, who has just recently moved their summit online. So there are a lot of options out there for staying informed. And a key right now is knowing who your prospective audience is. So going back to those basics, who are you serving and how is this current situation impacting that population? So I mentioned emergency managers before. That group, as well as healthcare, are significantly impacted right now. And we should be keeping that in mind as we craft our ways of communicating with them. So after we've listened, taken a moment, I think we're overriding each other. Once we've taken a moment to listen and pay it attention, you know, actually, so here's this is, before we move on, here's one of the options that I mentioned before for listening. So paid search trends, really interesting information right now on Google Insights. So as you can see here, search behavior around higher education related terms has shifted suddenly and drastically across the nation. So you'll see the yellow line here is distance learning searches, and you can see that those have spiked significantly all of a sudden, which makes sense. We can all understand that, right? But we've also got terms like higher education dropping a bit in use. In terms of kind of their relative popularity as a search term. So this is really an index. So it's over time. It's what of these terms, what are, you know, where are we seeing the most popular options? And online education, of course, has also increased in popularity. So these are key ways for you to get a sense of your consumer behavior and what people are needing and what they care about. So as we move forward, the next step, once we've identified our pain points, is to acknowledge and address them. So we're listening to get information. Hopefully, one of the things that we're gathering during that process is, what are the pain points that our audience is experiencing? So here's some data from a Google survey, recent Google survey, asking how COVID-19 has impacted consumers' lives. This is specific to the higher ed area, and what people are saying is they are, sorry, actually this is not specific to higher ed. There are some other slides that they've provided us that are specific to higher ed, but people are feeling financially uncertain. They have more work to do. They're unable to do their best work at home. They're feeling some strife around that, and they're also needing to balance care of others with all of these other things that they're dealing with. So at a macro level, the pain points that people shared in this survey are really no different than the pain points that people have experienced in the past. The difference is they are they are more extreme in nature, and more people are coping with these right now. So it's crystal clear that we really need to be addressing these. In a news release dated April 23rd, so just to speak to the level of pain point, the Bureau of Labor Statistics put unemployment at around 11%. And for context, that puts us, that's higher than the national average following the recession of 2008. So huge impact. And I know that higher ed community has not gone untouched. We know that there are furloughs happening, and that you guys are feeling this pain as well. So this is real. The pain is real, and this is an opportunity for us to get in touch with that and do the best that we can to address those pain points. So that means asking some of these questions. How do your offerings meet your students' needs? How will a student's life be positively impacted by enrolling at your institution? These are basic questions that we should always be asking, but they are particularly important right now. And what we're seeing, based on another, that same Google survey actually, is that students are placing a higher level of value on, for the first time in quite a long time, on flexibility versus financial aid. So when asked, people are more often answering that flexibility is the most important thing for them right now, which is not too surprising. The nature of their lives is ever changing right now, highly uncertain, and they need to know that an unexpected event will be well accommodated by your institution. I would also argue that flexibility equates, if we go back to our discussion of permission to believe, that flexibility equates to achievable. So it goes back to, can the student succeed? Do they believe they can succeed? So a flexible course schedule means a schedule they can make work. A flexible payment, so there's another area that people were focused on. That means that it's a payment they can manage. They can take care of this over time, and they're likely to succeed. So these are important questions to ask. Another sort of angle on this that I think is important is, we've got some results here from EducationDynamics 2020 and Beyond report. So that's being released in May. So we're almost there to the release date. Eric, do you know when in May that's coming out?
Actually, we'll talk about it. We're going to do a webinar May 27th about the findings,
okay.
and around the same time as when the report will come out.
Oh, great. Okay. So this is produced by the Aslanian Research Group, and Carol Aslanian, if you guys may be familiar with her, she's quite a personality and well loved by everyone at EducationDynamics, but she will be presenting the results of this. So this is just a little teaser piece of that. And you'll notice that the first 5 items for undergraduate and graduate post-traditional students are related to the feasibility of success. So if we think about that, it's, can they afford it? Can they, is there availability of online programs that would allow them to have that flexibility they so need? How long will it take them to complete their studies? They want to finish, they want to earn the degree. Are they going to be able to bring in credits from before? So again, it goes to shortening how long it takes, making it so that they can achieve the goal that they set out to achieve. So it's important that you identify what it is about your program and your school that makes it easier for students to succeed. And you can't stop there at identifying what it is about those programs. You really need to eliminate marketing fluff by asking yourself exactly how students benefit from the features that are built into your program and your school. So here's just a couple options for how you might go about doing that. So if you have, let's say you identify, you have 7-week terms. This is something that Carol talked about back at Calum, that short terms and short courses are more appealing to students. In fact, we've noticed that the search terms around short courses and short online trainings has increased significantly during this time. So people want something that's bite-sized, that they can get in there, get it done, and have accomplished something. So if you have that, you have maybe, let's say you have 7-week terms, that's great. but we need to bring it into a benefit. So we might say, finish a full course in 7 weeks. So you're hooking into what they can accomplish because of that feature. Again, student support services, kind of banal. And banal equals kind of unspecific and boring, but receive extensive support and resources to help you succeed. So that's the benefit that they will gain. Again, small class sizes. This is another thing that people are really looking for. If you go to some of the Google data, they want to feel supported. They need encouragement, and they also have requested more now than ever access to mental health support and services. So small class sizes translates to enjoy quality engagement with your instructors and classmates. And you can get even more specific with saying exactly how they will do that so they can picture it. So just important shift to make sure that we're shifting from talking about features to talking about benefits.
So as we start to customize and identify what the messaging is going to be, it's important for us to also consider how we're going to manage that communication. And we use several tools and a lot of technology to not only improve our messaging, but importantly, deliver it to the right person at the right time in the modality that they want. So for us, there are 5 really important points that we think about when we are considering the elements of our marketing, and specifically our marketing automation, that we engage in when we are trying to work with prospective students, and as we are trying to maintain engagement with current students that we were talking to. So the first and a very important part is list management, right? So we want to make sure that the lists that we maintain and the people that we are engaging with want to be engaging with us. So we carefully curate our lists, and we regularly remove people based on either demographics or behavior. We use their actions to tell us when they are disengaged. So for example, if someone hasn't opened several emails over a period of months, or they haven't been to our website after filling out a form for a period of time, we'll remove them from our active marketing list. And that doesn't mean that we have completely forgotten about them or that we're not going to engage them anymore. In fact, specifically, we have different rewarming campaigns that we will use to try to re-engage those individuals. But from our active lead prospect lists, we're removing them because they are no longer engaging, and we know that based on their behavior, and we can measure that based on their behavior. So closely related to that is segmentation. So we create a lot of segmentation in our lists, and so we've got a few very large lists, but a lot of much smaller lists. And we segment those based on both demographic information that we're capturing through forms, as well as through conversations that we're having with them, information that they're providing to us. So we call that our demographic information. And then we also segment and personalize based on their behavior. And this one is really kind of next level for us, and gets to the authentic and personalized messaging that we want to try to deliver to people to build that trust. So, so there are 2 things that we are doing when we're segmenting. We are providing triggers, and those triggers will move those individuals into the segment. And as I said, the first level is going to be demographics, and the second one is going to be behavior driven. And so an example of a behavior driven trigger might be an individual goes to a financial aid page multiple times over the period of a couple of weeks. We then assume or know that that individual wants additional information about financial aid. And so then what we can do is we can perform actions based on that and curate the messaging that we're providing to them to match and meet what it is that they are interested in. So for example, someone goes to a couple of financial aid pages, instead of sending them something about work-life balance, the next email that we send, or the next series of emails that we send, could possibly be something about financial aid. Contrast that with somebody who's, I guess, in the past would have potentially gotten that paid for by their employer. Maybe they're less concerned about financial aid or how they're going to pay for the class, but they're very concerned about work-life balance. we might put them into a stream where they get a series of emails about how they're going to be able to manage that. And getting back to what Jana was talking about, how they're going to envision themselves succeeding, because clearly that's something that's going to be compelling for them. So, we trigger that. But then the other thing that we do is we will automate tasks for our advising team based on their engagement with our marketing. So rather than calling every single student that we, or prospective student that we send an email to, rather than following up with a phone call, we may only send that to individuals that click on a specific link in an email, or specifically go to the application page, but do not complete the application process. So we're then able to target them and segment them out. And this gets to the next step is prioritizing our best prospects. So all prospects are not the same. We know that, and we try not to treat them as such, right? So we want the prospects that are the most likely to succeed in our programs and the best quality candidates, and those that are the most ready to engage with the program, to get the most attention from our advising staff, right? We have somewhat limited resources in that staff, and so we want to focus their attention. And we also know that some students or prospective students may only be kind of shopping right now or in a consideration phase. They may not quite be ready for action. So we're going to continue to nurture them, but we're going to move our best prospects to the top, where maybe they're getting some more targeted emails, but more specifically, again, maybe they're getting directed towards our advising team so that they can engage with them more specifically. So again, it's important for us to identify who it is that's the most likely to succeed and the most likely to enroll, and focus as much as we can our energies and efforts on those individuals. The next thing that we do is we really try to, again, I talked about this with our segmentation, but we really try to personalize that journey for the individual, right? So we kind of let them choose their adventure when it comes to that, and we use the segmentation that we have created to personalize that for them. So we'll send everyone the same series of nurture campaign emails to begin with, until their behavior or actions tell us that they want to go down a different path. And then once it does, we will we'll customize that journey for them. So if they want to receive additional information about, again, financial aid, they'll get that information. If they want to receive additional information about specific courses of study, we can serve up that information for them and provide that for them, or provide that information to the advisors so that as they're having those conversations with them, they know how to customize those conversations before they even get on the phone. They're able to see that information and know who they're talking to as an individual and what it is that they're likely to want to converse. And then that gets to our final point, which is really engaging the prospects when and how they prefer. So some important pieces of information that we have is we know when individuals are on the website, for example, and when they're shopping. Now, it might be a little bit on the nose if as soon as we see somebody is on the website for us to pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, are you thinking about higher ed right now? Let's talk about school. But it might give us an indication that if someone is on the website around lunchtime over a period of days, or repeatedly, that might be a better time for us to engage them or call them or text them. And then that's the other point of engaging when and how they prefer. If we have a student or a prospective student who is not answering the phone and it goes straight to their voicemail and they don't return calls, or they miss scheduled phone call appointments, but they are responding via SMS. Every time we send them a message, they respond fairly quickly back. That indicates to us that that individual is much more likely to respond via SMS, and that's the way that they want to be communicated with. So in some cases, we might consider asking them, how would you prefer to be communicated with? In other cases, we let their behavior dictate that, but those are important triggers for us and key points of information that we can use that will help us provide a better experience for them, which helps us build trust and make sure that that message is consistent, but that it's customized for them.
Yeah, absolutely. says that we've been listening. And I think that really goes back to that first point in a lot of ways. And so the next sort of the next bit of information is really about providing information. So so right now, the need for this is really based around what's going on. So we've got this situation that's happening, and if you look at the slide, what's interesting about this, I mean, because we were having discussions in the team about what is it that we need to include in our messaging, in our updates to students about the current situation. And so we found this information. So this was from a study a survey done by Morning Consult, a data intelligence company. So they surveyed 2,200 American adults on March 28th and 29th and asked them what was their preferred content in advertising. And here you see overwhelmingly what people really wanted was service adjustments and updates. So that includes things like hours, online options, for restaurants, free delivery, or shipping companies, free delivery. So this is what people were really overwhelmingly wanting. They also wanted to know what it was that organization was doing to help. And then after that, you have other key elements that you might think are more important. So let's look at an example of something that we did that was to align with this. So really focusing on informing the students. So this is an example of an email, a portion of an email that we sent out to students to clarify for them that things were that our online courses were happening, and to check in on them to see how they were doing. And just let them know what to expect from us. So as you can see, we do address the COVID-19 situation indirectly by mentioning our commitment to support students in these challenging times. But we mostly are focused on informing them and letting them know that yes, your courses are still happening as scheduled. And we also included resources to help them be successful. So going back to that first piece. And last but not least, we need to encourage and acknowledge our students. I think this is something we forget quite often. Everybody needs a little encouragement now and again. So this is a great example of, this is a retention email we send when a term is coming to a close or the end of a term is approaching, to acknowledge the student and make sure that they're getting what they need. So the subject line is, as you can see here, is geared toward encouraging them. So it's acknowledging their achievement, encouraging them, and then also checking in. And this is something that that we can also do in our marketing by spotlighting our students and identifying what have they accomplished and applauding them for those accomplishments. So our last few points we'll cover quickly, but these are again really important high-level things to keep in mind. So you need to make sure your messaging aligns with what people already know about your brand, and that includes existing messaging, but it also includes the actions. My little assistant has joined us now. The actions that your school is taking or not taking. So if you're talking the talk, make sure you're also walking the walk. Eric, can you take over for a moment?
Sure. So the second important point that we had was to facilitate idea sharing. And we've done a couple of things here that have been very valuable for us. We use Slack channels, and we actually created a specific COVID-19 messaging channel so that we have a very specific place where we can turn and our team can go and share that information that's specific to that. So that's one thing that we've done. We have also identified ways that that we can take time out of meetings to talk about specific things that have happened at different schools and make sure that what we are seeing or employing at one school makes sense for the other schools, and that at least those thoughts are being shared there, so that the whole team understands that. And that goes not just across the marketing team, across different schools potentially, but also different functional teams and areas. And it also includes our partner institutions as well, right? So making sure that we're sharing ideas with them, bouncing thoughts off of them, and getting their insights and hearing what they have to say as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And if just one moment to go back to a note that I would love for you all, talking about kind of brand messaging, to go and watch, if you haven't already, Uber's campaign on thank you for not riding, and maybe send me an email directly to let me know if that video erodes your trust or builds your trust in that organization. And if I was a betting person, I would say it was the former. But just an important thing to remember, that we should not be sharing messages. We need to make sure we're not sharing messages that go in direct conflict with what everyone knows are our goals as an institution. So it's something important to do as you're looking at your messaging. Thank you for covering for me there, Eric. My assistant is not quite as helpful as she thinks that she is. She's pretty cute, but not as helpful. So the last, my thing took up. The last thing that I want to leave you guys with is the importance right now of gathering tools to help you be more agile and responsive in the future. So I will bet that many of us were caught off guard by this situation. Of course we were. And many of us were caught without the processes and tools in place that we needed to respond as quickly as I think we all wanted to. So just a few things that I would like to note that I think are really are helpful in making sure that you are able to be agile and responsive. One is the content library. So it can be a simple tool, it can be a spreadsheet, but something that allows you to categorize and tag your content pieces for easy searching, and that allows you to identify where updates need to be made. So similar to what we were looking at earlier, a content calendar would have been really helpful for that school with regard to that gift planning situation. But also, any kind of a tool that allows you to really quickly identify what kinds of content do we just have out there? What might need updates? Where are we talking about things that may no longer be appropriate or relevant? Another thing is having a marketing automation system. So a lot of what Eric talked about relies on a really good marketing automation system. Now, you can do some very basic automation and segmenting without that. But we have found that to be quite helpful in making sure that all the time, not just during COVID-19, we are looking at what our students are doing, and then we are responding with messaging that's relevant for them. Another great way to build trust. And then last but not least, developing some communication protocol internally in your marketing team, across functional teams, and as Eric mentioned, with your partner organizations. To make sure that that messaging aligns and that everything is taken care of quickly, where maybe you have multiple stakeholders involved. Okay, so we threw a lot at you. Just to give a quick summary and focus in on some key takeaways. So we have to start with why. Students need permission to believe that they can be successful. They need to trust you. So this is really why we're doing what we're doing. It's why we spend the time evaluating our messaging and making sure that things are better. We also want more students in our programs. But if we're not starting with the student, then we won't be successful. So are you putting marbles in the jar, or are you spilling them out? Don't forget the basic considerations. So it's that why, what, who, when, how. What does that really look like? And be honest about that. Make sure you're not being tone deaf, derivative, or opportunistic. Those are things that nobody ever likes, and especially in a moment right now, like the one we're in right now. Focus on the student. There are lots of ways to do that. Be honest and consistent with your brand story. And make sure you're providing relevant information and updates. So this is a piece that I'm pulling out from our Focus on the Student section, because I think it's really key. This is clearly what people need and want. They want to be informed. They need to know what to expect. And make sure you're gathering tools to help you be more agile and more effective in the future when something else happens, which may be a smaller scale something. But this is a good opportunity to really identify and audit your existing processes. Okay.
So some additional resources that we'll also provide as links on the recording page when we send that out. This is in part based on the 2020 Marketing Trends report that we put out at the beginning of the year. Yes, it was written before we got into the pandemic COVID-19 situation, but for example, one of the things that we had identified was authentic marketing being really something that's going to be important in 2020. And so there are still there's a lot of good, valid information in there that that applies to the current situation that we're in, but really can be carried kind of throughout and is sort of evergreen there. So I recommend that you download that. There's also the creating an enrollment management ecosystem really goes to this theme as well, in that what you need to do is make sure that you've aligned your marketing with your actual program and with your advising team. And so creating a proactive supporting environment for the student helps you ride out these different environments and situations that may occur, or different things that come along. So again, these resources will be provided to you. I'll send them in the email. I'll send a link to the recording page after the webinar so that you can watch the recording and also download these reports. We've got several other great reports. And as we mentioned earlier, later in May, we are going to be releasing the 2020 and Beyond Attracting and Serving Today's Students. It's based on a survey that we did of both undergraduate and graduate post-traditional adult students. So be on the lookout for that, but importantly, register to join us at the webinar on May 27th. And just wanted to provide really quickly our contact information here. Reach out to Jana or myself if you have any questions, if there's anything that we can do to help you. We're happy to provide any information and help in any way that we can. So, okay, so questions. It looks like we've got just a few here. Let me see what we've got here first. So the first question, I think hopefully I've already addressed. Someone asked if the slides will be available, and yes, we'll provide the slides, those additional resources that I mentioned, and a recording of the webinar so that you can watch this as needed and share it with your teams and go from there. So. Another question, I think, Jana, this one might be for you. You recommend changing messaging for prospective students through advertising, et cetera. What are your thoughts on websites? So actually, this might be more of a marketing automation question. The question is, do we change messaging on the website to specifically address the individual that's on the site? That is certainly something you can do at some scale, depending on the technology that you have. You can do it, certainly we use Marketo, for example, in marketing automation, and we can create dynamic content and serve up different elements on pages. It's not something that we currently do because we view those websites a little bit more as brochures and we keep them more static. But we do have them segmented, and we send individuals to specific resources on and off those pages to help them get to the information quickly that they want. Did you have anything to add to that, John?
Yeah, I think so. My understanding is that the question may be focused more on just response to COVID-19 and making sure that we're addressing that in the not being tone deaf, so. I think one thing. Okay, good, Nikki. So one thing that we have done is we've made sure to add a banner. So in many cases, and we talked to several of our clients whose units within the university were really focused more on the post-traditional student or on online education. And what happened was that the message that the larger university put out about their response to COVID-19 was not in line, or it wasn't clear how that aligned with that specific units. So for instance, maybe extending spring break, but then it wasn't clear if that applied to online courses. So what we've done in our situation was that for the microsites that we manage, we made sure to put up a COVID-19 notification banner at the top of each microsite, clarifying that information for people so that it was showing up at the top of each page throughout the site. I think that we have done very little in the way of updating imagery on the microsites. I think as we audited the imagery we have in place, there weren't a lot of real concerns or issues, but it's worth identifying if there are. So something that we learned from another team internally is that they had an image of some people shaking hands in an ad, and it sounds like even more than some of our other images where there were people close to one another, the shaking hands made people uncomfortable. So there are some things like that you kind of have to make a judgment call as to how much of an impact you think it's having. And you can also use data for that. So looking at your Google Analytics, it's another way to listen, to pay attention to, do you suddenly have a higher bounce rate from a particular page that maybe has a questionable image on it? So that's just something to keep in mind as you're identifying those things. With websites, I think it's again, there's so much content, and it would be difficult to rework a whole site. That's why we talked about making simple updates. But I do encourage you to audit the content and put yourselves in the shoes of the student while you're doing that, and think, how might this land in a way that's problematic now that was completely fine 2 months ago? And if there's anything egregious, go ahead and make updates in a simple way if you can.
Okay, and then Carl asked, what is a small course size? I think that was one of the features that we had identified as being something that was important to prospective students. I believe that one, I'm not sure if Carol has that specifically identified in her report, but I will go through the report and find out. And Carl, I will specifically email that to you.
Yeah, and I think also it's good to point out that that is the question we should be asking. So when we're writing marketing copy and we find ourselves saying that they're small course sizes, that it leads to the question, well, what is a small course size? So it's a great question, and those are the types of questions that we talk about going back to basics. That is a question we should always be asking ourselves, but becomes suddenly much more apparent in a moment like this.
Sure, and the other thing that I would mention is when we talk about the length of courses is something that I know has come up in several reports that the Aslanian Market Research Team has put out, and consistently we see that courses that are between 6 and 8 weeks in length are more popular with students than full semester courses, particularly when it comes to online programs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, thank you very much again for joining us. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. If you have any questions, or if there's ever anything that we can do, please feel free to reach out to either of us, or connect with us on social media and let us know how we can help you. We enjoy having these conversations, and hope we'll see you again at a future webinar. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.